Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back in the video today, and today we're going to be previewing the Houston Rockets 2023-24 season as the Houston Rockets begin basketball today in Orlando against the Orlando Magic at 6 o'clock. I'm so excited. Rockets basketball is back. We're going to get to see Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet, the new backcourt. Ime Udoka is the head coach. Dylan Brooks also new addition, and this whole team is going to be so excited. I'm going to go over what the Houston Rockets 15-man roster plus 3 two-way contracts looks like, and also we're going to be going over key dates for the Houston Rockets throughout the 2023-24 season, and then we're going to end this video off with predictions for the Houston Rockets this season. Let's get into it. So here's what the Rockets roster looks like. 15-man roster plus 3 two-way contracts, and this is in alphabetic order. Okay, Dylan Brooks, Reggie Bullock Jr., Tari Eason, Jalen Green, Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday, Jock Landale, Boban Marjanovic, Victor Oladipo, wearing a special number 52. That's a weird number for Victor Oladipo. Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Jae'Sean Tate, Amen Thompson, Fred VanVleet, and Cam Whitmore. And then the following players are on two-way contracts. Nate Hinton, Nate Williams, and Jermaine Samuels Jr. So that is what the Houston Rockets roster looks like going into opening night for the Houston Rockets. And here are key dates you need to know for the Houston Rockets 2023-24 season. These are going to be some of the best matchups for the Houston Rockets throughout the year. All right, today, you have October 25th, season opener versus the Magic. Then the next game, October 27th, Rockets' first matchup versus Wemby, second game of the year against the Spurs on Friday. Then Sunday, the season opener versus the Warriors, and that's the first game for the Rockets at home of the year, the home opener. And it's also funny that Ime Udoka's first game at home is against the team a couple years ago, beat him in the NBA Finals. I think that game's going to be a little bit personal for Ime Udoka. And then you go on a 7-game homestand. Then November 10th, the Rockets' first World Cup game, or I call it the World Cup, first NBA Cup game versus the Pelicans. That game is at home. Then November 17th, you have another Cup game versus the Pelicans. This one is in Los Angeles. Then we're going to go in between the Cup games real quick. Then you have November 22nd, Dylan Brooks' first game against the Grizzlies, but that is in Houston. Then November 24th, another Cup game versus the Nuggets. This is at home for the Rockets. Then November 28th, Cup game versus the Mavericks. That's in Dallas. And then December 11th, you got I only have two really important games in December. Wemby's first game in H-Town of his career. So that's the first time the Rockets will welcome Victor Wembanyama, December 11th. December 15th, Dylan Brooks back in Memphis. This is going to be the first game that Dylan Brooks is back in Memphis. And then I gotta say, this is going to be the favorite game I watch, probably the favorite game I watch all year for the Houston Rockets, win or lose. January 1st, it's the first game of the 2024 year. New year, the Rockets' first game in 2024, and Steven Silas, former head coach of the Houston Rockets of 3 seasons, is returning to Houston, and you see the matchup between the two twins of Ausar Thompson and Amen Thompson. So that's going to be a great matchup, and that game's on ESPN. Not a lot of spotlight for the Houston Rockets recently. Over the last couple years, over the last 2 seasons, the Houston Rockets have not had a lot of national televised games. I think over the last 2 seasons, they've only had one game on ESPN or TNT, so it's going to be great. They only have one game on ESPN or TNT this year, but that's the same amount over the last 2 years, and I think this is going to be a great game with the Pistons and the Rockets on January 1st. Then, how about January 12th? The Twins play again. Ausar and Amen Thompson play again, but this time will be in Detroit, Rockets versus Pistons. How about the next night, though? You got back-to-back night of really intriguing matchups. On the 13th of January, Ime Udoka returns to the Boston Celtics. But then almost a little bit after, a week later, on January 21st, the Boston Celtics travel to Houston. Ime Udoka welcomes in his former team, or his former team. Then January 24th, 3 days later, the Houston Rockets host the Portland Trailblazers, and we get to see Scoot Henderson versus Amen Thompson for the first time. Then on February 2nd, Fred VanVleet's first game against his old team, the Toronto Raptors. Then exactly a week later, on February 9th, Fred VanVleet returns to Toronto for the first time to face the Toronto Raptors in Toronto. Then you have on February 14th, the last game before the All-Star break, and of course it is against the Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis. And then your first game after the All-Star break on February 22nd, first game back is at the Pelicans. And then your last game of the season on April 14th, last game of the year, is in Los Angeles against the Clippers. So those are your key dates that you want to know going into the 2023-24 season for the Houston Rockets. Getting into predictions, here is who I think will be the top scorers for the Houston Rockets this year. I have Jalen Green. Your top performers for the Houston Rockets this year, it's going to be Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., and Fred VanVleet, and obviously Alperen Sengun. I'm not going to predict stat lines or who I think averages the most points. I'm not going to predict how many points I think they average per game, but I am going to predict who I think leads the Rockets in scoring points per game in order. I'm going to go with Jalen Green at 1, Jabari Smith Jr. at 2, Fred VanVleet at 3, and Alperen Sengun at 4. No hate on Sengun at all. I think he's going to lead this team in rebounds. I think he'll be number 1 on rebounds. I think he'll be number 2 on assists. I think he'll be number 4 in points. So it's not bad for Sengun. And I think he'll probably be number 1 in blocks too. So I think Sengun's going to be great for this Rockets team. So I just think they're going to rely him more as a facilitator, especially for a center, which is crazy. They're going to rely him on defense a lot and rebounding. I think they have a lot of other scorers like Fred and Jalen and Jabari, and even Dillon Brooks is a decent scorer. Amen Thompson, Tari Eason's a great scorer. So, I think Sengun's a guy that will probably go out there and average 15 and 11, maybe average 15, 11, and 7 potentially for the Rockets. I think that's probably the stat line for Sengun, probably 15, 11, and 7. But I think Jalen Green has an all-star type season. I think it's going to depend on how the Rockets are doing as a team to determine whether Jalen Green is an all-star. If the Rockets are, like the Utah Jazz of last season, Jalen Green will be an all-star. And if not Jalen Green, Fred VanVleet will be an all-star. The Rockets, I'm thinking if they can play the right basketball going into the all-star break, if they're a scary team, if they're like I'm going to go ahead and say if they're a top 8 seed, which I don't know if they will be. I'm saying if they're top 8 in the Western Conference by the All-Star break, by the time they're announcing the All-Stars, the All-Star reserves, because I love the Rockets, but they're not gonna. I think you're not gonna find one NBA fan or one Rockets fan that will say the Rockets have a player that deserves to be a starter in the All-Star game, because that's not true. But the Rockets do have a couple players that could be reserves in the NBA All-Star game, like Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet. Maybe you could push it and say Alperen Sengun. But I think that if it going into when the NBA All-Star reserves are being announced and when fans are voting for the All-Star game and everybody else is voting, if the Houston Rockets are a top 8 seed or a top 7 seed in the Western Conference, whoever is putting up the best numbers for the Houston Rockets, whether that's Jalen Green or that's Fred VanVleet or Alperen Sengun or even Jabari, or who knows, if it's Dillon Brooks, if Dillon Brooks is putting up the best stats for the Houston Rockets, whoever's putting up the best stats for the Houston Rockets, and if they're a top 8 seed in the Western Conference at that timeline, at that point, and whoever their best player is playing pretty good, that player will be an all-star, and I think that player would be Jalen Green. So I think Jalen Green is all-star caliber. I think same thing goes for Fred VanVleet. He's been an all-star before. But when he was an all-star, the Raptors were a really good team in the Eastern Conference. So, we'll see what happens with all-star wise. But I think that the Rockets definitely have a lot of players who are capable of being an all-star, like Jalen, Fred, who's actually been an all-star before, and Alperen Sengun. Those are really the only 3 players I can see being an all-star on the roster. I think Fred and Jalen have great seasons. I think same thing goes for Jabari and Tari. I think also this Rockets team will be one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. We saw how great they were defensively. I mean, they got I think they were averaging like 14 or 15 steals a night in the preseason. They were also averaging like 5 or 6 blocks per night in the preseason. They're great defensively. I mean, great. You have Dylan Brooks, you have Fred VanVleet, Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, Jayshawn Tate, Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore. Great defense. Also, they're also being led by Ime Udoka, who's a great defensive-minded head coach. This team, I think, a big reason why this team will win ball games, a big reason why they will be, why they will be successful is their defense. I'm a little worried about the offense, I will say. I mean, sometimes they're inefficient. Sometimes they're looking really good. Sometimes they're not looking really good so far from the preseason, what we saw from them. But the biggest problem on offense was turnovers. And that was a problem last year. Looked like it was a problem in the preseason as well. So I hope the Rockets can fix that. But defensively, this team looks like they're going to be really scary. I think Jalen's going to have a great year. I think Fred VanVleet's going to have a great year. Just in total, I think Brooks will have a very solid year. I just don't know if he's going to be able to, play worth the money we're giving him. I think Jabari's going to have a way better second year. I think the same thing goes for Tari Eason. I think Sengun's going to be a most improved candidate for the Houston Rockets. I think, look at one guy who's going to be, an NBA award, type of potential. I think Alperen Sengun will be a candidate. I think the big thing it comes down to is Ben Simmons. What type of season does Ben Simmons have? Because if Ben Simmons has an amazing season, he's going to win most improved. But if he doesn't, I think the favorite to win most improved has to be Alperen Sengun of the Houston Rockets. So this is going to be a great team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And, to finish off this prediction, I'm going to go with the Houston Rockets finishing their season as the 10 seed, finishing the season at 40-42. So that's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts, and peace out. Go Rockets.